Welcome to Momentum Matters. I'm TeeJay Dowe, and this is your easy way to stay connected with what's happening across medicines, clinical care, regulatory updates in the UK. Each episode, we'll be exploring the topic that is shaping practice in care settings today, from medication-related incidents to epilepsy, diabetes, allergy and anaphylaxis, everything in between. Join us as we discuss developments, insights and real-world considerations that matter to you, care managers. I'm super excited for this episode as we got together three different people with three very different perspectives on a topic that we believe needs more conversations, needs to raise awareness and reduce stigma for people who live with this condition. It's the most serious neurological condition in the UK and probably the world. It has many different presentations, but most people are only aware of one type. It can affect anybody at any age and have a huge impact on their confidence, quality of life, and much, much more. And that condition is epilepsy. So join me now with my guests in the studio to learn more. So welcome to Momentum Matters podcast. I'm super excited for this episode on epilepsy. Gosh, that was a mouthful, wasn't it? This episode on epilepsy. So this is the second podcast in our new series, and I think it's going to be fun, and you'll hear some amazing stories and get some really, really valuable information. So my guests today are Tom and Jez. So I'm going to get you to just give your own little personal introductions, who you are, why you're here, where you're from, etc. So let me start first of all with you, Tom. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for bringing me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Tom Shillito, and I'm the Health Improvement and Research Manager at Epilepsy Action. So I've been with Epilepsy Action for about 4 years now, and my job is focused on listening to what people with epilepsy need, what their experiences are, what problems they're facing and what's going well for them as well, and then taking that information and turning it into positive change. So we do a lot of work with healthcare professionals and with health systems and also social care, as well as work in research, the policy sphere. We do a little bit of everything. But yeah, I guess that's where I kind of come into the conversation.
Yes, fabulous, because there is a lot happening in the world of epilepsy recently, for sure.
Absolutely.
So there's going to be some interesting bits that we'll pick up on that from that point of view. And let me also say hello to Jez. Introduce yourself.
Hi there. Yes, so my name is Jez Orbell. So I was diagnosed with epilepsy in 1991. And I think my story might be possibly interesting just to get some context about what the care was like back in the 90s and through into the 2000s and how things have actually changed. We'll come on to different aspects of my story about my driving, but since that aspect of my story has developed, I've got more into the advocacy work and finding out what it means to actually have epilepsy. And I've learned so much in just the last 18 months to 2 years. For so long in this this journey, I've felt like I've sort of lived it a bit on my own, as it were, because I didn't really know too many other people that had actually had epilepsy. So even though people have a view of what epilepsy is like, it feels like I've been a bit on the edge of it, because I've not had the full tonic-clonic seizures as people know them. I also feel like it's important to give everyone who has a form of epilepsy a voice. And because my story goes back so long, back to the early 90s, I think it's an interesting way to actually see how those things have developed over time.
Yeah, looking forward to hear what that difference is in those 30 years?
Well, it's
nearly
1991, so that was when I was diagnosed.
Right, yes. So lots happened since then. When we talk about epilepsy, it's the most common serious neurological condition in the UK and probably safe to say, in the world. But that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Well, one thing that fascinates me about epilepsy is there is so much jargon. When we talk about it, it's like a medical dictionary. So I'm going to ask you, Tom, how would you explain epilepsy just in really simple terms?
Well, I guess the official way to sort of characterize it is you get diagnosed with epilepsy if you have a predisposition to have epileptic seizures. So what that means is if you've had one seizure that is thought to be an epileptic seizure as opposed to a non-epileptic seizure, which is slightly different, and you're likely to have another one, then you're going to be diagnosed with epilepsy. But in practice, usually people have multiple seizures and it does take a little bit of time and there's lots of investigations to get to the point where you're diagnosed. And just to sort of explain the difference between epileptic and non-epileptic seizures,
Yes.
epileptic seizures are caused by kind of bursts of electrical activity in the brain that sort of come out of nowhere almost, whereas non-epileptic seizures, usually the underlying kind of trigger for them is something psychological rather than physical. So you could be having seizures that are 100% genuine, but if the trigger is psychological rather than that burst of electrical activity, then you wouldn't have epilepsy. You'd have another, one of the other conditions that can also cause seizures.
So it's that electrical activity in the brain that is absolutely key in the diagnosing of it's epilepsy or it isn't. Yeah,
Yes.
interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So why is it important for care professionals to understand epilepsy, particularly because obviously people that we're speaking to today are in that world of care, whether that's with adults or children. So why is it so important that care professionals understand it?
I think you need to have an understanding of epilepsy to be able to make sure you're providing the right care to people. And I think because it is such a common condition, because it's, 1 in 100 people in the UK have epilepsy, if you are providing care to more than, 5 people at a time, you are going to be looking after people with epilepsy, even if you're not necessarily aware of that straight away. So it's absolutely vital. Just understanding the basics can make such a massive difference to people.
Yeah, I agree. And epilepsy can start at any time. So you might be looking after people right now who don't have epilepsy, but that could change. And I think also that awareness of the different types of epilepsy that we'll get onto a little bit later. People think of epilepsy as one thing. And of course, there are many different types of epilepsies. So I'm excited to have that conversation and raise that awareness for sure. But from a personal experience to you, Jez, how would you explain epilepsy?
Well, it's an interesting question, really, because when I found that I was explaining my absences, I mean, back in the day, it used to be called petit mal. It's a term that doesn't get used as much these days. But you try to put it in a context that is understandable. So what I used to say is like you've been watching a film and then 2 seconds of footage have been cut out of it. So you might all be in the same place and everything's there, but things are sort of slightly different. From my own personal experience, it's kind of like a daydream state for a moment in time. So while my seizures are now managed, it took a long while to get to that point. And so after that initial diagnosis in 91, I was 22 then, I do think I was probably living with it for a number of years before that, but it hadn't really been picked up. We talk about at primary school, children daydreaming in class. I actually had it in a school report. Now that may just be just one of those things that put in my school report, but in theory, it could even have gone back as far as that. The first time when I was really aware from a personal point of view was when I was in my first job. I was losing concentration when I was doing some tasks on the computer. And that was the first time I was kind of aware of the feelings that I had later. But even then, it was still like 3 or 4 years before the official diagnosis came through. But, that's my experience. And I didn't really have real knowledge of epilepsy as we've come to think about it. And even then, we know that there are so many different forms of that condition that can be triggered in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And that's why all the work that's being done with awareness is so important. And that's why having the opportunity to be on an episode like this is just a real privilege. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. We appreciate it, because it's all very well from a professional point of view, be it you, Tom, or myself as a pharmacist. But when you don't have actual experience of that condition, then you can talk about it in theory and you can raise the awareness, but you don't really know what it's like. So I love that we get to understand it a little bit from your point of view. Lots of different seizures. So you've alluded to the fact that absences are one type of seizure, but there are 21 seizures. Am I right, Tom? 21 seizures.
Yeah, 20 from the new updated classification.
Yes. Thank goodness, because we did have 63, right?
We did, and even more before that. Yeah.
Yes. So you're talking about some of the reclassification, and there wasn't enough jargon in it. We've got a whole new layer now as well, haven't we? So I'm trying to get my head round, or my tongue around some of the titles. So we've got 21 different types. We're not going to talk about 21 different types today. We'd be here all day, won't we? But I think it's important for people to understand that there is more than just tonic-clonic seizures, which the general public, of course, would be most familiar with or think of when we think about epilepsy. But what other seizures, Tom, should people be aware of?
Well, there's a few, I suppose there's the 21 official definitions, but largely you can group seizures into a few different types. So like you've mentioned, the clonic seizures are the seizures people will think of when you say seizure. They're the ones where someone they go very stiff, they'll fall over, and then they'll start shaking. If you see a seizure on telly, that's usually what it's going to look like. So that is one type of seizure. But there's also seizures that are more difficult to notice, like Jez has mentioned, absent seizures. They can look like daydreaming. They can look like you're just looking off into the distance and not paying attention. But actually what's happening within the brain is that electrical activity disrupting your consciousness. Focal seizures are probably the hardest to describe because they can look so many different ways. So focal seizures, you can either be conscious and aware, or you can lose your awareness during a focal seizure. And the experience of the seizure can be very varied. So for some people, they might retain their awareness, but they might feel an emotion very strongly, or they might get a really strange sensation. For others, they might lose their awareness and they might do unusual things. They might start pulling at their clothes. They might, if you're out walking on a road, some people will keep walking, but they'll have lost their awareness, which obviously risks walking into a road. Or I know quite a few people that have walked onto railway lines and things like that off platforms when they've been having those types of seizures. But they can look very, very different to different people. And then there's myoclonic seizures. So they're sometimes called jerk seizures because your arm or leg will just jerk out. So they only last a second, although you can sometimes get a few in a row. But the person is completely aware of what's going on, but their arm just moves without them telling it to. And then there's tonic and atonic seizures, which are, I guess, kinds of opposite sides of the same coin. So for tonic seizures, a person will go very stiff and fall over. And for atonic seizures, a person will go very floppy and fall over. But again, they usually don't last very long. They're, a few seconds up to a minute. But you don't necessarily want to be falling over all the time. They're still seizures, they're still serious, they're still unpleasant, but they look very different to what the public might think of when you say seizure.
Yeah, agreed. And some of them, as you say, are quite kind of bizarre in their presentation, and the general public could very easily jump to a not so nice conclusion other than, oh, that poor person's having a seizure. So I think that is so important that we're still, through this podcast and lots of different other avenues, of course, raising awareness of the different types of seizures that present very differently. And I think we've still got a big job to do in terms of raising awareness. I was over in Ireland last week working with some medical trainers to deliver epilepsy training out there. And the level of stigma still is actually quite shocking. They've done a survey in Ireland. I was looking at some of the statistics for how does that compare with the UK. 45,000 people in Ireland have epilepsy. And they reckon that's probably underreported because they said they'd done a survey and 78% of people in Ireland considers still that the stigma is extremely high. Now, I don't know whether we've got statistics for the UK in that regard, but, even here in the UK, there's still a lot of stigma and lack of awareness and jumping to conclusions. So people definitely misunderstand it. And even in our care settings, there still is, again, a lot of misunderstanding and lack of awareness, unless they've got somebody in with a particular type of seizure that then they get to understand a little bit better. So in terms of statistics, Tom, have you got any figures for us? You said 100, 1 in 100 people in the UK has epilepsy. Tell us more.
Yeah, so it's about 630,000 people in the UK. So yeah, it's about 1% of the population have epilepsy. There are slight regional differences. There's slightly more people in the north of England than down south. More people in Northern Ireland than in some of the other countries, England, Wales, and Scotland. There are links with deprivation. So you do find more people with epilepsy in more deprived areas, and we don't fully understand what that link is yet, but it is something that is present in data from the UK as well as data from other places. So yeah, it's a very, very common condition. And I suppose the key thing for me is that even if you think you don't know someone with epilepsy, you absolutely do. It comes back to, like you've just mentioned, the stigma. People won't always tell you about it.
Yeah. I've come across people who in a workplace don't want to tell an employer unless they really have to. Or can you please keep it quiet from my colleagues? And you kind of understand it, don't you? But if they have a seizure and somebody doesn't know they have epilepsy, then they don't know how to look after that person. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts, isn't it? How open you are with it or not. So in terms of equality and accessibility to diagnosis and things, so do those figures, because they differ north and south and, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, is there any difference in access to services and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. If you look at the distribution of healthcare professionals, the neurologists are in the places where there aren't people with epilepsy. If you want to find a neurologist, go to London. They're all in London. If you want to find a person with epilepsy, go essentially anywhere else. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the relationship between presence of neurologists and prevalence of epilepsy is inverse. Like, you get more neurologists in places where the number of people with epilepsy is lower, which is really bizarre to think about, but that is how it is. So there's the most robust services are in places like London, which leads to either people in the areas with a higher prevalence not having access to the correct level of care, or it means that people are having to travel halfway across the country to receive good quality care. So yeah, there are real issues.
Wow. I'm actually quite shocked to hear that, but it makes a lot of sense when I'm talking to organisations and they, saying, so it sounds to me like it's epilepsy. Have you had a diagnosis? No, we're really struggling to get that diagnosis. So that probably explains why. And you talked about, so many people do have epilepsy. You think you don't know somebody, but you probably do. In the statistics that I've seen again recently, they reckon that 1 in 20 people will have a one-off seizure at some point in their life. And it's just that blows my head off because it's like, way more than 20 people, right? So you definitely know somebody. Now, that might not be epilepsy, of course. It could be non-epileptic seizures. And then the statistic of 1 in 50 people will have epilepsy at some point in their lives. And again, like you think, well, I know way more than 50 people. So you're right. Really good chance that, several people at least who have epilepsy, but you might not know that they have because they haven't said anything. So
Absolutely.
I think So interesting. And in terms of what would make then the biggest difference for people living with epilepsy right now in terms of what needs to change policy or politically wise? So I'll come to you first on that one, Tom. I don't know if you've got some thoughts on that one as well, Jez.
I think more investment in healthcare would probably be top of my. I've probably got quite a long list of demands, but that would be the top one. I think if there was more resource available, we could have much better access to healthcare. It could be easier to get in to see a neurologist. It could be easier to get that diagnosis. We could bring the massive waiting lists for neurology care down, and investment in research as well. If we could have some new treatments or new surgical interventions, new pieces of technology that might be able to help. There's a lot of potential out there. We just need the funding and the resource to sort of bring it to fruition. Yeah, I think they'd probably be my top asks.
And your wish list.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Jez, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it always comes down to investment. We always want to see more investment in those things, and I think it's working your way to how you best manage the resources that you have available. But one of the things I would say about from my own personal situation, again going back to how I had my treatment back in the 90s and comparing it to what it has been in recent years. I had, with the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire epilepsy team, a really unusual experience, which I'm really thankful for, is that I had my appointment and it didn't seem to have an end point to the conversation. So I was being spoken to, and it was almost like not a counselling session as such, but they really dug deeper into every aspect of my care and what I needed, and not feeling like I was being rushed out of the door. You've got 8 minutes and you have to be pushed through. I thought, I wish I'd said that or whatever. If you can find a way of being able to balance that investment and the research onto all the different forms of the conditions that are out there, and also taking into account for also issues like care for carers, because there's this ripple effect, because it doesn't actually just affect the individual. There's the family around them that also need the support as well. There's not a bottomless pit of money that we can draw upon. It does take time and making sure that we are using the resources that we have the best way possible. But if we have time where we can actually sit down with people and get to the root of what people's issues are, then you can really find what it is that they need. So, again, I've alluded to it already, that if I need access to work and transport and things like that, okay, here's some advice about what options you've got with the benefit system and things like that, because I didn't claim anything or anything to do with epilepsy until the last 10 years. So none of that happened before. I didn't really want to claim things, but it would perhaps have made my life an awful lot easier back then if I knew what was out there, but I simply wasn't told. Those are the kind of things that have changed. It's just making sure that access of information is clear for the people that need it.
Yeah. So you had absence seizures. You think you probably had them for much longer than before you got your diagnosis.
Yeah, well before.
I think that probably is absences, probably the seizures that go unnoticed for the longest time in the most young people. How many kids are being told off for? You're daydreaming again. You mentioned that, didn't you?
Yeah.
There you are in trance. And I would love, one of my top wishes is that we would get epilepsy training more widely, or awareness into school settings, so that the teachers would be aware of just looking out for those things. Are they just daydreaming again, or is there a possibility that it actually could be a seizure? And, highlighting it to get something raised about it. So, because I do think that is the case for a lot of young people. But let's talk about the human side of things. It's all very well, I was talking about the condition and the challenges, but for you, share your experience of your diagnosis, what day-to-day life looked like once you'd had that diagnosis, your journey through from 1991. I'm just going to give you the mic. Hand over the mic. You hand the mic over. Let's hear a real story.
Okay, so back in the late 80s, when I was living in Norwich, that's when I first noticed that something was happening, but I didn't know that it potentially could have been epilepsy at that point. But I'd come back to Peterborough, where I was living at the time, and I'd had a particularly stressful time at Thomas Cook, where I was working. And one of my colleagues had actually said to me, "You've had, they just look like blackouts. What's going on here?" And they pointed it out to you. Sometimes it does take other people to point it out to you that something's going on, and then you sort of start to reflect and thought, actually, that is a bit strange. Maybe I ought to get it checked out. And that's when the diagnosis sort of came in. I'm really thankful for her that she actually sort of said that, because sometimes people wouldn't necessarily say, because, is it really my place to actually say something? So, but this had been going on, as I say, at least 3 or 4 years, and perhaps it had reached a kind of a zenith of, if you like, at that particular point. And I went to the doctors about it, and they said to me, "We advise you not to drive until we know what's going on." Just to sort of fast forward a little bit, I'd had an EEG at Addenbrooke's Hospital. It's a long time ago. You don't want to sort of say anything negative about different medical institutions, because they do a lot of good work, because everything about my experience there was great. But I think it's important to say about one part of the experience when I was in hospital there, because this is one of the things where things have changed. I'd had an overnight stay, and because they hadn't been able to pinpoint what was causing my absences, I'd actually been told it would be more helpful if you had more serious seizures, because then we'd have a better idea what to do about it, because we can't work out what's triggering yours. So there was that. And then said, "This is Mr. Orbell. We don't quite know what to make about him." And then just walked off. He was with student doctors. And you thought, you're 22 years old. What am I supposed to do with that information?
Wow.
And I had no one with me. And for a while, I used to just sort of joke about that. He said, "Look at me, I'm really different and nobody knows what to make about me." But you sort of think, no, that's a terrible way to sort of talk to people. I think a lot of these things have changed, but it just goes to show that back then it was very different. And I think one of the other important things about context is that diagnosis was 6 months before the first website page even existed.
Oh,
So
wow.
you couldn't just go online and look things up. You had to either wait for your next appointment with a consultant or go to the library, so you were working off scraps in terms of getting the information that you had.
So all that brilliant information that you have on your website, Tom, you couldn't access?
Yeah, things have really changed over the last, few years, haven't they? It's, I suppose it has its strengths and its weaknesses. Come to Epilepsy Action's website, because you will get accurate information. Googling things can lead to slightly different results. But yeah, it's shocking that you were left with no information and no support, and a diagnosis that, how are you going to know what to do with that if you've not been given the information you need from the people that are meant to be looking after you?
Yeah. I mean, the one of the other interesting aspects now is, because you have the NHS app, and you can look back on the medications that you were given back in the day, and you sort of go back and you scroll back as, oh, okay, I was on what dosage of that? Really? It's almost as if they're trying to top me up on certain medications. My head was actually spinning. My eyesight had gone. And I remember sitting in the medical room at the place where I work, where I just could not focus on anything. And my life was effectively being made worse by the amount of medications I was being given at that time. So it was almost better just having the occasional absence than with the the medication I was being given. And there's that situation where you're feeling guilty. I should be working here, and then I'm just sat in a room in the dark, just trying to make sense of what's going on. So you're trying to navigate this stage, and you don't know anyone else that has that condition. So that's one of the challenges that I had right at the very beginning. But one of the things I will say, it's kind of a double-edged sword, or both sides of the coin, however you want to word it. In some ways, I went and did certain things which, if I'd had too much information, I might not have dared to try. I might have stayed at home and not done things. So I still went out and I did marathons and things like that. So I did, what we're recording in the London Marathon is happening this weekend. And there's lots of people that are doing that, and it's an amazing experience. But I may well not even have attempted that if there was sort of risks involved. But I had a wonderful experience of actually taking part in something like that. I've abseiled off the side of a building. So sometimes too much information can actually be a bad thing, because you can start to worry about too much. But obviously you've got to get good advice as well.
You do indeed. So lots of medication, all work in different ways, basically trying to reduce that electrical activity in the brain to stop the seizures happening. And often what I see as a pharmacist is what we're aiming for, jargon, is optimal therapy.
Yeah.
That's like the holy grail, isn't it? Optimal therapy. The smallest dose of the fewest drugs with the least number of side effects. That really is quite challenging to achieve. And so they'll start drug of choice, whatever that might be, depending on the types of seizures that you have, because of course not every drug treats every seizure. Start with the smallest dose, build it up. Oh, can't go any higher. I'm quite control the seizures. Let's add another one in. Build it up. Oh, nearly there. Let's add another one in.
Yeah.
And it was weighing up that quality of life. What are the side effects? What is the impact? Have I got to take it 4 times a day? Man, I can't remember to take it 4 times a day. And then you forget, and then you have a breakthrough seizure. It's just this whole conundrum that we have to work through, isn't it, to get to a point of control of seizures that is not impacting your life in a detrimental way. And I think, we have to weigh up that balance. I've heard a lot recently talking to various, particularly children's services, where young people have been put on a particular drug and it's caused a lot of anger issues and behavioural challenges that families are really, really struggling with, that side effect, and then clinicians being reluctant to change it because it's controlling the seizures, but the behavioural issues far outweigh that quality of life for the family as well as the young people. So it's interesting to hear your experience of being on meds and how that made you feel. So tell us more about, you said that they'd advise that you stop driving straight away. Tell us more about the driving journey, so to speak.
The driving journey, yes. So that was February 91. And they'd said to me that it did change from 1 year to 2 years and back to 1 year to go seizure free before I could get my license back. And you sort of think, well, okay, that's not great, but it is what it is, and you sort of manage it your best you can. And the most I ever went back in the 90s was 4 months, and then I had an absence in the design studio where I was working, and I sort of broke down in tears in office, and I thought I'm back to square one. Do you know what I mean? Because you sort of think, oh, I'm getting somewhere, and then you're back at the start again, and you just don't know how long it's going to take. Now, what I would have thought, if it was going to take as long as I did take to get my license back. I mean, I can skip through various aspects of this story just to to give you the whole process, but there was different medications tried. I used to call it like a cocktail that was
Yes.
tried, and they said, well, we'll try a bit of this, a bit of that, different levels and whatever. And you get to the point where in the early 2000s, I felt almost like, in terms of treatment, I won't say I felt like I got forgotten, but it was almost like, this isn't going to work for you. I'm sorry. We've tried all these different things and it wasn't really working. And I made a decision with my my consultant. I said, I don't see the point of continually putting chemicals into my body if it's not actually going to make a difference. I was kind of coming to the terms that it wasn't going to happen for me. So we managed a reduction of the tablets until I came off them, and it was probably 6-7 years where I wasn't taking any medication for it at all, and my life didn't really change that much. I was still having absences. I used to say it was like 3 or 4 a day, or a couple a week, or whatever. Sometimes it's plus or minus 1 or 2, but it wasn't unbearable to live with, if you know what I mean. And then I met my current wife, and we got together and we started talking about it. She said, well, possibly there was maybe there's some new treatment on the market, maybe there's a new medication. You don't know, things change. So we sort of looked into it, and we did go back to the start again, as it were. And then I was on levetiracetam, which I still am on, and then go through to 2013. With my epilepsy nurse, she suggested including ethosuximide. Now, having those in tandem for whatever reason, which I cannot explain, something about that seemed to click. So it didn't happen immediately. It was a few months, but come to September 2023, I went seizure free. So a year from that date, I was able to apply for my license again. And I think the thing about that was you then get a whole new set of emotions come in place. It's that, okay, I can apply for my driving license, then should I? Because, it's 3.5 decades nearly, and it's not just your life you're thinking about, it's the people around you. So you're basically giving up one lifestyle which you've lived over half your life for, and what is this new lifestyle going to be like? And I was talking to someone recently, because I bought my first car at the age of 56. There's not many people that can say that. And I remember going through the drive-through at McDonald's, and I thought, you know what? This is the first time I have ever done this from the driver's seat. And
That's amazing. But what, let me go get this right. So from the age of 24,
22,
you didn't drive or have a car till you were 56.
I didn't. 34 years.
Wow.
I owned a car for 34 years.
Amazing. I just wanted to just stop and clarify that. Did I hear that properly then? So I'd like, that is, well, it must be life changing. Tell us what's it made possible, and what's that mean to you?
What, to get the car back?
Yeah.
Well, you feel like a passenger all the time. And there's one occasion, I was talking to my wife about this. Before my dad passed away, he was in a care home, and I was going to go and see him that evening. So this was before I got my car back, and I had the situation whereby I could wait at home for her to come home from the work that she was doing, and then she could give me a lift to go over and see him. But I made the choice that I want to keep moving forward on my terms and take control. So I was using public transport to do that. So even though it took me longer to make that journey, I wanted to feel like I was in control. When you don't have control, you don't want to just defer everything to everyone else. You don't want someone else to ferry you around. You don't want to take up their time. You don't want to feel like a burden, whatever. And I said, no, I want to go and see my dad and I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't always click with people that, well, it's fine. I could do that for you. I said, I don't want you to. It's fine. I just want to know that I can actually have that control myself.
Mm.
So the idea that when you get your car back and say, I can do that, I can help you for a change, So that's really important for me. And we had a couple of elderly friends who my wife was helping last year, and she was almost at a risk of burnout herself with the amount of running around that she was doing, and I was able to pick up some of the slack for her. So whether it was going to get shopping for them and doing those kind of things, because again, right at the very beginning, there was no, I can order shopping and it can be delivered to the house. You can't actually do that. You actually had to carry it all yourself.
You didn't have delivery to your door.
No, you didn't have any
We take it for granted, don't we?
Yeah.
Internet, websites, food deliveries were not a thing.
So actually having the ability to at least have the choice, that's the important thing. And again, the fact that I'm sat in this room now, I could have done this remotely, but I didn't want to do it because I'm fascinated by the whole podcasting process and I love having conversations with people and being able to do it face to face. I just wanted to drive here and be there, and it's part of the story.
You drove here from Peterborough to Stoke-on-Trent. I love that, to sit in the studio.
Wow.
Could have been on my screen like you, Tom, but no, we're just going to sit
That's dedication.
by my side. It is, right? It's absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I can't imagine not being able to have my driving license and it's that independence, isn't it? And just that being in control of your own life and where you go, what you do and all the rest of it, not relying on other people all the time.
Yeah. And I heard someone fairly recently say, oh, my car's been stuck at the mechanics for 3 days. And I said, well, you try 3 decades. It's like, it's, that's the thing. Right at the beginning, you don't think it's going to be that. Time goes by, and then all of a sudden, to bookend the experience, I think, is the key thing to realise, because a lot of people with epilepsy are in this position where they don't drive. And I think people as a whole, they understand that is a possibility, that is one of those situations. But when they sort of hear that not driven for 34 years, then they sort of, whoa, it kind of takes a different story in itself, because then you think, what opportunities have I missed out on? What could I have done at this point? Where could I have gone? And that's, in its own way, that's one of those things that I'm still kind of navigating myself. How could have things been different? I've got no regrets or anything like that. I've had to adapt and make the best of the cards I've been dealt, and the weird thing is, I consider myself very fortunate, because if you are going to be dealt the epilepsy card, I've been dealt a really good hand at it. Yeah. So you've got to sort of remain positive, or I remain positive from my own personal point of view, because I know that there's people out there that have it far harder.
And I think your story is brilliant in terms of people who are living with epilepsy that at the moment are not able to drive. Who knows, at some point gives you hope that,
Yes.
there's even if it's 30 something years, somewhere in the future, it may well be possible.
It can change, absolutely.
And who knows, we might have self-driving cars by then and it not make a difference to getting around. It's probably not the too distant future, isn't it? So brilliant. I love that you've got your license back, that you've driven here today. And it's not even like next door, is it? It is quite a distance to get
here.
It's
a beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day. It is. But have there been any challenges in getting your license back? Because we've heard like the brilliant side of it, but has it come with its own challenges at all? Especially, are you still on medication now?
Yes, still on medication now. So that's not changed. So this year I'll be 3 years seizure free. In some senses, I was surprised how simple it was. So even though I applied before I was entitled to apply I think it was 6 weeks beforehand, but I didn't want to sort of risk it just before the 12 months tick round. It still took from September through till the December before I actually got the license back, to get that back from the DVLA. But I thought, okay, you're going to ask me to do some kind of extra test, or my insurance is going to be sky high, or whatever. But so I've got a 5-year license. So whether that is part of it, I don't know. So it will have to be reviewed at some point. But they seem to be fairly okay with it, and it's working a place called Grantham, just north of Peterborough, and my commute was well over an hour and a half for a while, and it's basically been cut in half because I was
Oh,
using
wow.
buses and trains. And again, it gives you time, which I didn't have before. But one of the things I will say about how things had just changed, just to touch on a little family story. The license came through just before my 56th birthday, and my daughter said, "Well, I can give you a lesson in my car, Dad, and you can get an hour's cover." I didn't even know you could do that. Went out in her car on the back roads around our village, and a lot of it was a bit like riding a bike, and that was great. And then she said, "Well, there's a B road up there." I was like, "No, I can't do that." And it was like after 45 minutes, it then looked like that's enough. I've at least been through that process. But to do that with my daughter, who just turned 23, so she's basically the same age, I was being given a driving lesson by my daughter. That was a special moment for me. And then after I had the year anniversary, my 3 children, they basically gave me the opportunity to do a lap at Silverstone, where my dad had worked in the pits in Formula One in the 1950s.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
And, so to go to a point where you daren't leave your village, to go to a point where you're driving to Silverstone to do a lap of the circuit. And okay, it was quite low speed and all the rest of it, but to actually be able to do that is kind of completes that kind of part of the journey.
We're not jealous, are we, Tom? I
Not
wanna
at
do
all,
it.
honest.
It's so cool. Do a laugh at Silverstone. I love it. I love it. So we've talked a little bit around experiences. Thank you so much for sharing. It's just so interesting to know what it's been actually like. Those milestones and those challenges and the medication and all the rest of it. In terms of treatments, Tom, let me come back to you, because the World Health Organization are still about halfway through their 10-year plan, aren't they, at the moment? It's got a catchy little title, the Intersectoral Global Action Plan for Epilepsy and Other Neurological Conditions. It doesn't even abbreviate well, does it?
It doesn't.
So we're about halfway through that. If I remember correctly, it runs to 2031 to their 10-year plan. And very much in terms of what we've already spoken about, raising awareness, reducing stigma, reducing the amount of injuries and impact and deaths due to epilepsy, quality to services and finances and all the rest of it. And I do wonder, I've seen quite a few things coming into the world of treatments in various forms, be that maybe not so much medication, a little bit that's been in the news recently. Perhaps Matt, you want to share a little bit about that? But things like technology. I'm a brain nerd. I am a bit of a technology geek as well. I love that we're starting to move forward, and I do wonder whether it is the World Health Organization focus that is driving things. Of course, we spoke earlier about the reclassification of seizures as well. So what's going on in the world of treatments, any new treatments, any things on the horizon, tech-wise, etc.?
I'll start with medication, because there's much less to say about that. As you've just said, we've got a few different generations of epilepsy medications, but some of the ones that we're still prescribing now, we've had for 100 years. And I'm probably being slightly unfair, but broadly they're operating on the same kinds of mechanisms. They're all different, and different drugs work for different people, but there hasn't been any massive innovations in medications for epilepsy in recent years. There are the early stages of inklings of things that might be coming in. There have been some promising developments around personalized medicine and how you can sort of tailor, how you can choose the right medications for people based on their genetics and what you can find out from their genome, which is really interesting. There's been some work on that around genetic epilepsies, so epilepsy syndromes that often come with epilepsy and lots of other conditions as well. So that's really positive, but like I say, it's the early days and there's a lot more to sort of happen there before it becomes a big new shiny thing we can talk a lot about. But for technology, there really has been a boom in all different kinds of applications of tech for people with epilepsy, from using it in healthcare. There have been some kind of surgical developments as well as things that people with epilepsy can use themselves and care providers can use in care settings. There's really interesting stuff out there. So I suppose there's, from the point of view of people with epilepsy, there are things like wearable devices. So there are things you can wear that will alert other people if it picks up that you're having a seizure. There are things that you can use at night, bed monitors and things like that, that will alert other people if you're having a seizure during your sleep. There's apps on your phone where you can keep your seizure diary that will remind you to take your medication, that will tell you when you've got your appointment, that will do fancy things with AI to pull out themes between, you've slept less on this night and the next day you've had a seizure. Could there be a link there? There's some, really interesting stuff happening in that sector. And then there's, the use of AI. It feels like a cliche at this point to talk about AI, but it is being used more and more in healthcare as well. There's applications in, for example, reading EEGs. So part of the kind of diagnosis process for epilepsy is you will have a brain scan called an EEG, and AI seems to be very good at pulling out the bits of those scans that are seizures, so that doctors are only looking at the bits that are relevant to epilepsy. And then there's the use for like recording information. There's all sorts going on in the tech world at the moment. It is really quite exciting.
It is quite exciting. I was catching up on things like there's been a more advanced MRI scanner. So we've gone from an MRI 3 to an MRI 7. And even just when you look at the pictures side by side, just the detail that you can see, that particularly with the focal epilepsies, you might be able to actually pinpoint things within the brain that they've not been able to see to get a better diagnosis and understanding. And so I think that's really excitement. And some of the, like you say, the surgical things that are coming through. I got super excited. I'm a vagus nerve geek.
Well, there's a lot happening with VNS. Absolutely.
And so exciting. And there's a lot of, we had this flurry of external vagus nerve stimulators in the health and wellbeing market. And they're all talking about epilepsy. It's like the race is on. Who's going to get a license first? That's going to be a game changer, isn't it, Tom? If you can see if VNS stimulation works for you without having to have the generator implanted on your chest and, attached to your vagus nerve. And I was also seeing, I can't remember the long name for it. It's nicknamed Easy.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? I was like, wow, that's interesting. So you've got the generator under your chest wall. Have you seen it? Like you do with a vagus nerve stimulator. And then you've got the electrode that goes up the side of the neck. And then it's almost like little hexagonals linked together. That's a little pad that sits between the scalp and the skull, delivering electroactivity into a part of the brain that you want to influence. So that was cool in itself. And I saw that they were going to use it for pain management and Parkinson's, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was work up at Royal Victoria in Newcastle on Tyne. But what was exciting was it looks as if the battery is recharged through the skin into the generator. And I'm just like thinking of like vagus nerve stimulators of the future, not to have another operation to get your battery changed. That'll just charge inductively through the skin.
Yeah, it's
just like
fascinating. Yeah, and just things that can be implanted, but they're less invasive, like easy. It's under your scalp, it's not through your skull. So it's much quicker to do, it's much safer, it's easier to recover from. And then there's tech that's being developed, like you say, that sits on the outside completely, that doesn't need surgery, that can stimulate the vagus nerve, or there's kind of long-term wearable EEG devices that don't need any surgery. They just sit on your head and take measurements.
Did I see that one that looks like a spider?
Yes. Yeah.
I've got a little note on my laptop on a Post-it note that says, find the photograph of the spider on your head with a beanie on the top. You wear it under a beanie so you wouldn't even know it was there. But it's such cool technology. So interested, and I've been watching with interest. I don't know whether you guys have for about 4 or 5 years now with Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Yeah,
man, that's phenomenal. I mean, the patients that have currently got Neuralink, so the Neuralink is a BCI, brain computer interface. So it sits in the skull with tiny filaments attached to individual brain cells, uploading information, downloading information into the brain. And the guys that have it implanted at the moment that are paraplegic and have ALS, motor neurone disease, isn't it, over here? It's just life-changing for those. But it's intriguing. So I've been watching it. There's got to be an application for this for epilepsy somewhere. And they finally announced it, haven't they? And some of the latest updates that when Neuralink goes bigger parts of the brain or full brain connections, then things like epilepsy and other neurological conditions are definitely in the sphere of, being managed very, very differently. So I'm really excited about stuff like that. And the whole AI thing around that as well, Tom. So
absolutely. It's a good time to be working in epilepsy tech.
Yes. So at one point, I don't know if you know the answer to this, at one point, SUDEP, so sudden unexpected death and epilepsy. And that's why some of the wearables are really great, aren't they, that we're seeing in the UK right now. It's a shame some of them are very expensive. Maybe those prices will come down. Or maybe the NHS will be so kind. Perhaps NICE will
that would be ideal.
I don't know. I'm putting it out there. But in terms of SUDEP, at one point on their website, it's probably 2-3 years ago, there was a wearable apnea device that it was like a prototype. It didn't look very pretty. It looked like this big box on somebody's neck. But I loved the concept of that if in that, particularly tonic-clonics, or tonic seizures, when you've got that can't breathe because your ribs are squeezing your lungs, that it would catch that stopping of breathing to create an alarm to alert other people that somebody that, the loved one is having a seizure. And it looked as if it was going to the next stage of clinical trial, and then it just seemed to disappear completely. So I don't know why that was. Had you seen that?
It's ringing a bell for me. I think I can guess the researchers that were involved. I'm certain I've had conversations with them about it, but I haven't heard anything about it, like you say, in quite a while.
I look back on that because I'm following their website with interest, because 21 people a week die from sudden unexpected death and epilepsy. 21 people a week, that's crazy. And so I'm following it, particularly from what are we doing about it technology-wise to reduce those numbers. So I was super excited to see this thing appear, and then it just seems to have disappeared completely. I did see that in the world of sleep apnea, they've definitely gone forward with wearable devices. So maybe it'll come back in the future. And that's where I started to discover those new wearable devices around the top of the arm or the wrist that have come onto the market. So at least we're kind of picking it up and running with it somewhere, for sure.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
sort of in the, I guess it's maybe slightly less techy, but it's still tech. SUDEP Action do have a really good app for managing your risk of SUDEP. So if you have epilepsy yourself, or if you're caring for someone with epilepsy, you can use their app to assess what your risks are and then reduce those risks as well. So that's an app that, you know, we will always promote to people. It's a really, really good tool to use.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because that's really, it's important, isn't it? So 21 people a week, and that's so devastating for those families that lose somebody in that way. So talking around technology and treatments and things, treatment plans really, really important for people with epilepsy. So I'm going to ask you, Jez, in terms of those epilepsy care plans, what's your experience of did you have enough involvement in your own treatment and care plans?
In terms of a care plan, there didn't really seem to be much of a plan as such, other than the medication that I was prescribed. And in terms of then coming back in 6 months' time, and we'll just review how it's going. And again, talking about certain vitamins may sort of help you, and balanced diet and all the rest of that. And those are obviously important thing to do in any stage of life. So it was kind of a bit sketchy in terms of what's being done today. I mean, I know the Epilepsy Society down at Chalfont are doing different things with personalised treatments. Didn't seem to have much of a plan. And it's only really in this last few years that it's actually had some kind of structure, but it's still really been based around the medication. And it's just been a fortunate thing for me just to make sure that I take the meds on at consistent times, don't miss doses. But one of the things I will point out on that is I have had issues with the supply chain of ethosuximide. There was one occasion when the pharmacist had been given lots of notice that I was running low, and then I said, "Well, what's happening here?" And then they said, "Oh, we haven't been able to get hold of it." They hadn't contacted me, and I literally got to the point, "Well, if I don't get it today, I've literally run out, and you don't come this far to only come this far." And I actually had to get the medication from a different town. So I've had that with ethosuximide twice now. So that's one of those little worries, and it's also a stress thing as well, because if you can't rely on your medications coming in, then that could potentially be a problem. And a side issue from that, which may be an issue for different people, really, as opposed to myself, is that some medications, they look different. So even my last medications I had a 250 milligram and a 50 milligram of the same medication, and they were from different suppliers, and it may be completely fine, but what do I know? I'm not a pharmacist, so I'm used to my yellow tablet coming
Yes.
in, and then all of a sudden I'm being given a pink tablet that's a different color, a different shape, and what is this that you're giving me?
And it's important to have that reassurance that it is the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just a different manufacturer. That's really important, because it is really confusing for people. And so I do get that. And scary if you can't get your medication. Like you say, you've come so far to not be able to access the meds that you need, that then would set you right back to square one again.
Yeah.
Is terrifying. Yeah. Tom, you're in shipping.
For just to come in on that point, for some people with epilepsy as well, it's really important that they don't change brand. Like
Yes.
the same medication made by different manufacturers can affect people differently. I know that's not the case for most conditions, But for epilepsy, depending on the medication and depending on the person, it can be really serious to have your drugs changed for a different brand. So keeping an eye on things like you've just mentioned, Jez, like, is it the same colour? Is it the same size? Does the box look the same? And just double checking, am I actually okay to switch, or do I need the one that I've always had?
Well, I'm due a review with my epilepsy nurse soon, so I'll have a conversation about that, because I don't seem to get any say in what actually happens in that situation. In in that ethosuximide example, I was just glad that it came in, because I was worried that it was even going to run out completely. But they just seem to come in, oh, this week or this month, you're going to have this particular manufacturer. And you don't know why that's the case, but that's actually my experience. And is it something that I should be saying, no, you should not be doing that? And should I be speaking to other people to make sure that that doesn't happen in future, to make sure that they do have the right medication that comes in, that it's consistent?
Absolutely. Not to sort of do a little plug for Epilepsy Action, but if you have a look at our leaflet called Don't Sub My Drug, that takes you through like which medications can and can't be switched and what do you need to ask your healthcare professionals. It's just a really short leaflet, but I think it's a really good resource to help people make sure they're sort of asking the right questions and getting the information they need. But like you say, in your situation where you've run out completely, something is definitely better than nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and epilepsy medication, like you say, Tom, is one of the exceptions. In most medicines, it doesn't matter, but for some reason, it is a thing with epilepsy. And to be able to challenge the prescribers, why are you changing my brand? You know, it's epilepsy medication, and it is one of the exceptions to the rule that I stay on the brand that I started on. So it's good to be able to put that out there, because not everybody knows, and not all of the prescribers seem to know either. I think it was a decision that was made such a long time ago that not everybody's getting that message. So good to have those resources from Epilepsy Action as well. Talking to care plans, Tom, we were looking at care plans. Just, what are there really great templates out there? What's gold standard? Because for some people, depending on their types of seizures, or may have more than one type of seizure, and where people are not controlled, sometimes those care plans, particularly if they're being cared for in the care system, are really, really important. And I do have to say, I'm going to sing you praises, because when we were looking for like what is good template out there, what's heading for gold standard, I think the best that I saw were the Epilepsy Action care plan and the midazolam care plan as well. And I quite often will say to somebody, that combination of the two, if you've got somebody that is on rescue medication, is a really good place to go to. So there you are. I'm bigging you up.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome. Praise where praise is due. There's lots of resources out there, but that one's definitely one that I signpost a lot of the time. So, last few questions for you in terms of looking after somebody, allowing them to feel safe, supported, in control of having their say in epilepsy, whether it's a formal care plan or whatever. And I'll ask you both, what does good epilepsy care look like in practice? So we're talking to care managers and people in the care industry. What should good practice looking after people look like for them?
I think for me, like you've just mentioned, having a really solid care plan is number one on the list. You need a care plan that both goes through what to do in the moment of a seizure, but also what to do the whole rest of the time, making sure you've got good medication adherence and that you're tracking things that are happening. So keeping a seizure diary, keeping good records of what has been happening for that person kind of day to day. And also making sure that if you're looking after a person who has multiple different conditions, you're not looking at them on a condition by condition basis. You're looking at them as a whole individual, because what might help with someone's epilepsy might harm their diabetes, for example. You want to make sure that you're making decisions for a person rather than a condition. And the other thing I think that's really key is continuity of care, making sure that you've got people, particularly if you're in a kind of care setting, that you've got people that know that individual really well, that they know the history, that if you're going to appointments, the person that might be attending appointments with them knows what to say, they have the records, they have all the information they need to hand, and that the person with epilepsy can trust the people around them, that they're understood, that everybody knows what epilepsy is and how to manage it. And yeah, that you're just, I guess, trying to support in the best way you can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, just to go back. I mean, I sort of mentioned about, it's just taking tablet. I probably oversimplified that. So just going back to the Peter and Cambridgeshire epilepsy team who'd been working with me, the whole diary aspect of it, I did go through that whole process as well. They were very supportive in so many different ways, but there was that continuity of care that went through that, and they were always so responsive, because sometimes with some institutions you feel like I need to find out some information, and it just feels like it can just drop into a black hole and you don't actually hear anything back. But particularly with them, they've always been so helpful for me. So I always appreciate the team there. So they've been fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we've talked about a lot, haven't we? We've been here, there and everywhere with epilepsies. I like it. So I'm going to wrap us off. I think it's been a brilliant conversation. What key message would you like to leave listeners with? So I'm going to come to you first, Tom, and then let Jez have the final word. Well, I get the final word, don't I? Let's face it, it's my podcast, but hey, the final guest word. Tom, what message do you want to leave the listeners with?
I think epilepsy awareness is really key. You just need to know a couple of key facts about epilepsy, and then you'll be able to support everyone around you much better. So that really is the bedrock. Find out, what does seizure first aid look like? What is epilepsy? And then you set up for success.
Yeah, fabulous. And I'm going to come back to you after I've gone to Jez, actually, for you to tell people where they can go to, and feel free to plug. I am good with that. Just to get the information, then there's the support that they need. That's really important that we signpost them a little bit as well. So, Jez, what message do you want to leave listeners with?
I think it's important to talk about it, and I've never really been worried about actually sharing my particular situation. Again, possibly because it's been fairly mild, and I know that there is that stigma that some people face. But I think if people have that understanding that you're in that situation, more often than not, you'll find that they do actually want to help you. And what you said about helping people understand early and making sure that it's known in schools, that is fantastic. And what people are doing in the workplace, there's people that are doing workplace training, and I think that's important. And I'd like to see that to be rolled out more. But I will just say one thing for what Epilepsy Action are doing. I was having a conversation with the team there, and they're thinking big in terms of the awareness thing. I said, why can't we talk about our message on the Champions League screen at Chelsea Football Club? Why can't we do that? And sometimes you say, let's see how big we can make this message and make it as accessible and as understandable as possible. But it's making sure that you have the conversation so people know that it's not just seizures as we've come to understand it in the past. People have all kinds of issues in all sorts of ways, and it can, and it's making sure that they have that understanding.
Yeah. I would love, don't know about you, Tom, but I would love for a celebrity who has epilepsy to come forward and just champion a really good awareness campaign. That's on my wish list as well.
It's absolutely on ours as well. The number of celebrities we've messaged, you'd be surprised. But it's that stigma as well. People don't want to talk about it, which is a real shame.
It is such a shame, such a shame. So further information and support, where do people go?
So epilepsy.org.uk is the Epilepsy Action website. We have a huge amount of information on there, as well as support services for people with epilepsy and for carers and parents of people with epilepsy. But we also do a lot of work with healthcare and social care professionals as well. So anybody who's involved with epilepsy in any way can come to us, look at our website, speak to our helpline and get any kind of help and support you might need.
Amazing. And we'll make sure that we put those in the show notes and things for people as well, in case they didn't have a pen and they've got a very good memory like mine. We'll put it in the show notes so that they can go straight there. So I have to say thank you both so much. It's been such interesting conversation. I've been fascinated listening to both sides of the coin. And so I am excited for our listeners to have absorbed all of that information and seen the professional and the personal side of things. So thank you so much for investing some time to be with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully some point in the future, maybe we will do a ding ding round 2.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, that was a really great conversation, right? Insights and lots of really helpful information to support you and your team supporting clients with epilepsy, both now and in the future. As promised, here's how to connect with Epilepsy Action and Epilepsy Society and, of course, Momentum People. You can connect with Epilepsy Action at www.epilepsy.org.uk and the Epilepsy Society at epilepsysociety.org.uk. We'll put all the links in the podcast blurb so you can get to them easily. Lots of great information that you want to go and search on both of those websites. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, Momentum Matters, to get regular episodes and keep you inspired and up to date. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn, and go to momentumpeople.co.uk to view the list of courses and products that we have available to keep your team current and compliant in all things meds and beyond. So thanks for being with us in the studio again today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.